Thank you. I'm going to talk to you tonight about an organized conspiracy in American healthcare to deprive you of a medicine, a compound, a cocktail of proteins and peptides and hormones that's been shown to accelerate wound healing, prevent infection, to enhance cure rates and remission times for cancer, to decrease the morbidity and mortality from heart disease, and to delay the progression of HIV. This medicine is called hope. And the reason that I know there's an organized conspiracy is because I'm a physician and I am a part of that conspiracy. And I will tell you that hope is too powerful a medicine to leave in the hands of the cartel that I belong to. So I want to talk a little bit about the nature of hope. I'm going to start with the Greeks, who had a way of putting their finger on the existential questions. Zeus was furious that the human beings had acquired fire from Olympus, and as part of his plan for revenge, he created a beautiful woman, Pandora, and he sent her down with a box that was locked and had a key, and he said, no matter what, under no conditions, ever can you open this box. And then he had Pandora wed Epimetheus, who was the brother of Prometheus, who had stolen fire. And Epimetheus knew a little bit about Zeus and his penchant for revenge. So as a precaution, he kept the key on a chain around his neck. But as often happens in Greek mythology, one night he had too many cups of wine and he fell soundly asleep. And Pandora snuck in and she stole the key and she turned the lock and she just opened the lid on this box just a little, and out flew all the woes and evils of humanity. Disease, pestilence, war, envy, rage, they just flooded out across the globe and entered into the hearts of men. And she slammed the lid closed as fast as she could. In the morning when Epimetheus awoke, he heard her sobbing next door, and his heart sank because he thought about what must have happened. And he walked in and she explained that she had tried to slam the lid shut as fast as she could, but the box was empty. And she held the box open to show him. And when they looked, there was still one spirit left at the bottom of the box, and it rose up and it hovered in front of them for just a moment. And it was hope. And then it flew out across the world to try and help humanity deal with the tragedies and the woes and the sufferings that the gods had visited upon them. Now, there wasn't a lot more introspection into the power of emotion and hope for quite a while, until the late 19th century and early 20th century, when there was a group of prominent physicians like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle here, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, and this man, Walter Buchanan, who was the head of physiology at Harvard. And they got interested in emotion from the dark side, if you will, from the side of black magic. They were very interested in voodoo death. And they carried out a number of investigations because they were intrigued. How was it that somebody who was young and robust and healthy, if they believed in black magic and a curse was placed upon them, that they would inexorably die in a matter of days, sometimes hours. And at autopsy, there was no visible cause of death. They said, how is it that somebody's beliefs, their thoughts, can be so powerful that they can kill them? The next chapter is in World War II. This gentleman is Henry Beecher, who was an anesthesiologist. And in 1942, he was assigned to in North Africa to the medical corps. And on one particular bloody day, there had been scores of soldiers wounded coming through the hospital. And towards the end of the day, there was one wounded soldier who came in and he put his glove on and looked inside the wound and saw there was shrapnel. And he yelled at the nurse. He said, "I'm going to need 3 ampules of morphine, and we're going to have to take this soldier to the operating room." And the nurse turned to him, and she said, "Dr. Beecher, there's not a single ampule of morphine left in the hospital. We've used every ampule of morphine in the unit, including everything that the medics had." And he said, "That's impossible. How am I going to take this soldier back to the operating room without morphine? He's going to die on the table. He'll go into shock and collapse." So the nurse turned, and she kind of turned her back towards the soldier, and she took a syringe, and she filled it up with saline from an intravenous bottle, a completely inactive solution. And then with quite a bit of drama, she went to the litter where the soldier was lying, and she said to him, "I'm going to give you a very big dose of morphine, and you're going to get very sleepy, and you're going to fall asleep, and you won't wake up till the operation's over." And so she injected him with this inactive saline. And to Beecher's utter amazement, in a few seconds, the soldier's eyes fluttered, and he fell asleep. And Beecher then put his finger in the wound again, and there was no reaction. He was asleep, and he was just amazed at what had happened. And he went on and spent the rest of his life researching the placebo effect, for which he had become famous for the discovery of the placebo effect. In fact, he didn't discover it, was the nurse. He just was observing. Now, he never was able to figure out why the placebo effect worked, but in the 21st century we can, because we now have brain scans. And this is a normal volunteer, came into a lab, he's given a shot of morphine, and then a brain scan is performed, and they look at what's going on in his brain. As you can see, there's a lot of this yellow and orange activity in the rostral anterior cingulate cortex, and there won't be an exam at the end of this. But the reason the rostral anterior cingulate cortex is so important is it's because it's where we house our beliefs, the things that we trust in, the things that we have faith in. And this volunteer came back several weeks later when all of the morphine had cleared out of his system, and he was given an injection of saline, just like that nurse in 1942. But he was told it was morphine. And then they imaged his brain. And you can see here, even though this is completely inactive, there's a large component of activation again in this rostral anterior cingulate cortex. And literally, his belief that this is morphine is so powerful that he is activating his brain as if he received morphine. So, what do we know about hope? Well, now we know a great deal. For example, if you have kidney cancer, renal cell carcinoma, and I give you a survey, a questionnaire to figure out whether you're pessimistic and sad and depressed about that, or you have an optimistic and hopeful attitude. If you're optimistic and hopeful, your median survival is twice as long as the group that's pessimistic. In breast cancer, if I give you a questionnaire at the time you're diagnosed with a breast cancer, and you're in that group that's optimistic and hopeful, I can see the effects of that hopefulness 15 years out from the time of diagnosis. If you have heart disease, and I separate you into groups that are pessimistic and sad and depressed, and a group that's optimistic and hopeful, the group that's pessimistic is going to have more than 2 times a fatal or dangerous complications such as a second heart attack, arrhythmias, congestive heart failure. And when it comes to HIV, again, if I separate you into a group that's pessimistic and a group that's optimistic about your outcome, and I follow you for 5 years, the group that's pessimistic is going to have a 3-fold higher risk of dying. Now, you remember that I told you I was a conspirator. And I'm going to tell you how I found out that I belonged to the cartel. Many years ago, a young man came down to see me from Flagstaff, Arizona, with a brain cancer. And he was a young man, an athlete, an avid outdoorsman, and a fly fisherman. How many of you know about fly fishing? Okay, well, for those of you who don't, it's a religious cult in which the followers wear rubber waders, and they stand in extremely cold water, and they have a long, flexible fishing rod and with a line, and at the end of it, there's a little piece of fur and feathers with a hook, and they spend their entire lives praying that something will take a bite at it. And it turned out this young man was a god in the world of fly fishing because he had made several flies that were very famous. He came down, and we removed the tumor. As I said, he was young and healthy, so we were very aggressive. We gave him radiation therapy and 4 bouts of chemotherapy, and he had a marvelous attitude. He was enthusiastic. He had a wonderful family that was always with him. In fact, when they would drive down from Flagstaff, I had my clinics on Wednesdays, so I knew when he was coming to the clinic because they drive down in their RV the night before, and I'd see the RV parked in the parking lot at the cancer center, so I knew I'd see him the next day. And he did quite well. And one day in clinic, his folks were out at the desk getting appointment slips or something, and we were alone. And he pulled me aside and he said, "You know, Doc, I know I'm going to beat this cancer. I know that. But," he said, if ever things aren't going right, if something goes wrong, I want you to tell me when it's time to go fishing." He said, "You know what I mean." He said, "I want you to tell me when it's time to go fishing." And I said, "Yeah, I got it." And he did well for several more years. Unfortunately, the tumor grew back, and it grew back on the other side of his brain, and he had several more operations, and the last operation about a dozen years ago on Thanksgiving. And by that time, the tumor was growing down around the top of his spinal cord. And it just so happened that we were getting ready to discharge him, and his parents were out at the nurse's station getting scripts. And I was alone with him, and I said, "You remember a few years back we had a conversation about when it was time to go fishing?" And he looked surprised. He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, it's time." And he became visibly pale in front of me. And it was like he was shrinking. It was like I had stuck a pin in him, and he was deflating in front of me. And he went home with his family, and the next day I got a call from his mother that during the night he had died. And I know he didn't die from that tumor. I know he died because I took away his hope. I know he died because he saw me lose faith in him, and then he lost faith in himself. And no human being has the right to do that to another human being. Hope is a combination of ability and power. It's the ability to see a future that's better than the present, and it's the power to try and make it happen. And it's too important to ignore. It's too important to just leave in the hands of me and my cartel. So my prayer is that you'll go home tonight and you'll take stock of your reserves of hope, that you'll find out that you have the sufficient ingredients, your friends, your family, your faith, your love, your spirituality, so that you have the ability to make the hope that you'll need when you face the crises in your life, that you can summon that little spirit that sprung out of the box. You know how at the television programs that sometimes where they have a lot of stunts, they go, "These people are trained professionals, don't try this at home." Well, I'm going to tell you that when it comes to hope, it's such a powerful medicine that you can't leave it in the hands of trained professionals, and that you have to do it at home, and that you have the power to make all the hope that you will need. You cannot depend on the cartel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.